point and shoot camera sales have seen a significant decline worldwide according to a 2018 study done by CIPA. And with smartphones getting so good in the past couple of years, it begs the question, are compact cameras dying? Well, today we wanted to find out. We have arguably the king of computational photography, arguably the king of just a well-rounded camera system, and we have a very high-end separate camera from just a couple of years ago. We're going to test several modes including low light, HDR+, portrait mode in a variety of different settings and a myriad of different conditions to really see which one is best, and to see really if after all these years and all of this processing, if smartphones can overtake high-end compact point-and-shoot cameras. But before that, let's talk logistics and why we're even doing this experiment in the first place. Smartphones always used to have one problem. It didn't matter how good the camera was, it was only that good at one focal length. You couldn't pinch out to zoom out and to get a wider field of view, and similarly you couldn't pinch to zoom to get a better zoom image because all the zoom was cropping into that image. It wasn't optically moving like it is in cameras these days. In fact, ultra-wide and zoom lenses come in smartphones as cheap as $200. And the same goes for camera sensor size. They're just plain getting bigger in smartphones every single year, and it's fantastic to see. Sure, they're not quite as big as in their compact smartphone contemporaries, but Sony, Samsung, they're closing the gap, and closing the gap fast. From live on-the-fly HDR to night modes to portrait modes, phone cameras are now using simulation and funky processing to make up for that difference in hardware, and quite simply, it's working very well. And when it comes to sharing, do I even need to spell it out? It's easy to tell that smartphones are the king of taking a photo and sharing it immediately. And the thing is, the idea of a point-and-shoot camera is just that, to take on holiday or to use around family time so that you can capture the moment and the memory without any worry about settings. It's literally point and shoot. But the problem is, smartphones seem to be doing that whole point and shoot thing an awful lot better than point and shoot cameras. So with all of that said, it seems like the smartphone has a pretty good chance of beating the purpose-built compact point and shoot camera. But can it do it? We have our phone set up in photo mode, with extra testing done in night mode and portrait mode to really stretch the legs of the Huawei and Pixel phones. The point and shoot camera is set to auto, and we're only testing JPEG performance, even though all three can shoot RAW. This is to more accurately represent the average user. No effects or editing trickery will be applied to any of the test images. Let's look at the first set of images of my bike in the park. What's glaringly obvious is the blown out sky in the shot from the Sony camera. Between the loss of information up there in the sky and down there in the shadows, namely the tyres, it almost looks like it's had a cheap filter applied to it. The Pixel 4's image looks better, but is still a little dark and isn't as realistic as the P30 Pro's image, that more represents reality near enough perfectly. Zooming into the rear tyre, the Pixel's lack of sharpness really shows. The Huawei device certainly improves on this, but is seemingly no match for the sharpness of the Sony camera. That said, the information in the shadows is still far better on the smartphone's images. Moving on to the fast flowing river to really test the sharpness of the devices, they look very similar at first glance, but once you zoom into the tiny waves in the river, you notice the soft peaks from the Pixel 4 and almost muddy looking colours from the RX 100. The P30 Pro does a better job at defining each mini wave given its colour processing, even if it's not quite as sharp as the Sony. This shot of a supermarket at night is interesting because it's where the Pixel 4 really gets to stretch its computational photography legs. The Asda logo, the foyer and the car park itself are all well exposed thanks to Google's superb software. The P30 Pro overexposes the Asda logo and doesn't quite get the colour right on those blue banners in the middle of the scene, but the worst image by far here is from the RX 100 surprisingly. Even its massive 1-inch sensor is no match for the smartphone's tremendous software processing, and this shows not only in the overexposure of the Asda logo, but also in how dark the car park is, and this is before we've even turned any night modes on. Onto human subjects now using portrait mode, and the main thing that stands out to me is just how much more bokeh we're getting from the smartphones. The Pixel 4's image, whilst a little green, is the nicest looking of the bunch to my eyes, followed by the much more accurate P30 Pro and then the RX 100. Interestingly, even though the bokeh is an effect and it's processed on smartphones, it seems to work flawlessly and even look very, very natural, given the reflective golf balls behind the subject, creating those bokeh balls. Zooming into the next set of photos is where the P30 Pro really comes into its own. At a distance, I'd say the image of this chimney is best captured by the Pixel, thanks to its high dynamic range, cleaner contrast, and brighter overall image. This all changes, however, when we zoom into the chimney. With each camera dialed in at its maximum optical zoom, the Huawei captures so much more detail than any of the other three can, as shown in the bricks and the chimney tops. I was surprised to see the Pixel being so close to the Sony when it came to how much crop occurred, and I'd still take the Pixel's brighter image. It's selfie time, and I decided to really test the colour and skin tone accuracy on these cameras. Both phones were set to portrait mode, and the RX100 was in auto with the screen facing me thanks to the little flip mount that's built into it. I have to say, the P30 Pro, whilst not producing the prettiest image, produces the most realistic and accurate colours of the three, whilst the Pixel offers the most bokeh at the detriment of its skin tones. And the Sony did a horrible job at rendering my skin along with the blue monitor and the warm lamp behind me. Video is our final stop, and wow, has this taken me by surprise. Straight out of the camera, the P30 Pro looks to be the best in this situation at the beach. The stability is more gimbal-like, the dynamic range is greater than the other two, and the exposure is damn near perfect for the lighting situation. I was fully expecting the Sony camera to walk all over the smartphones in video, but that just isn't the case. The video is by far the worst due to its poor exposure, poor stabilisation, and least realistic capture of what was actually there. Remember, all three devices were set to auto and have not been fiddled with at all. So, what can we take from this experiment? Well, first we kind of have to understand and take into context how each device takes an image and processes it. The camera shoots a single image and doesn't apply any kind of filter over the top of its in-camera color preset, but the smartphone on the other hand takes multiple exposures and fuses them together along with added color and sharpness to make each image pop. Smartphones are designed from the ground up with this kind of processing in mind, such as with portrait mode, with HDR+, with night mode. Every single image you take with your smartphone is processed a lot before you see it. Raw images, which all three devices shoot, however that the RX100 shoots a little bit better, contains lots more information but gives you a flatter, less pleasing image out of the camera, and it's what professionals tend to use because you can pull a lot more detail out of the highlights and of the shadows, giving you greater dynamic range, and it gives you more flexibility to play with the colours without distorting or adding any kind of artifacting to the final image. And sure, the Sony camera does a better job with these, but we're talking about point and shoot cameras. We're not talking about professionals who go in and use professional monitors, professional keyboards and mice, professional computers to get the job done. We're talking about the bang average point and shoot camera. The gap is definitely closing between smartphone cameras and high-end point and shoots such as the RX100, to a point where 99% of the time, not only is your phone going to be more convenient than a camera like this, but it's going to shoot the better image as well. Camera manufacturers, or at least Sony, are reacting to this change. Their latest release, Sony's RX100 Mark VII, has a 24 to 200mm focal range, which is much more than what we see on the P30 Pro. But there's that lack of innovation on the software front, where smartphones have taken that and completely leapt forward with it, that really needs to come down to cameras and the camera industry as well. Things like EIS, HDR+, portrait mode, night mode, these things are outpacing point and shoot cameras at doing just that, pointing and shooting. And camera companies need to wise up, or they're in for a big shock. And with that, I want to conclude another one of these little experiments. I've really enjoyed doing these, so if you want to see anything else like this, please let us know in the comments. We'd be happy to take another look. Hopefully you learned something today. I certainly did during this experiment. I really was not expecting that RX100 to be almost demolished in most categories by the smartphones. There'll be a link in the description to the full article, which will contain the Google Drive folder to the full resolution images if you want to look at those for yourself. With that all said and done, I've been Ryan Thomas with Android Authority. Thank you all so much for watching. Please do like, comment and subscribe if you're new around here to never miss a video like this one, and I'll see you later.